Okay, let's dive right into this. Every single day, we casually flip switches, plug in our phones, and rely on this totally invisible force that absolutely runs our modern world, electricity. But have you ever actually stopped to think about the true cost and the massive benefit behind that simple, everyday action? Well, welcome to today's explainer. We are taking a comprehensive, totally evidence-based look at the two sides of the electrical plug. First, we're going to explore the proven physical impacts that generating all this power has on our planet and our health. And then, we're going to tackle some highly debated, incredibly controversial claims about how electromagnetic fields themselves might actually be affecting our biology. It's a fascinating duality, and we're going to break the whole thing down.
So here's our roadmap for the explainer. We'll kick things off with the miracle at the socket, and then we'll pull back the curtain on the toll at the source. From there, we'll shift gears into the EMF controversy and weigh those claims directly against the scientific consensus. Finally, we'll wrap up by mapping out the real path forward. All right, let's get into it.
Section 1. The miracle at the socket. How electrification saves lives at the point of use.
You know, we really do take it for granted, but the simple act of electrifying a home or a hospital, it's honestly one of the most profound public health interventions in human history. And this brilliantly illustrates the fundamental trade-off of electricity. Think of electricity purely as a carrier. At the actual point of use, where you plug things in, it is entirely clean. It means families aren't burning wood right in their kitchens. It means world clinics can finally refrigerate life-saving vaccines and literally keep the lights on for emergency surgeries at night. But there's a catch. The true cost of that clean, safe socket depends entirely on the point of generation. That's happening miles and miles away at a power plant, where we're suddenly looking at ambient air pollution, huge CO2 emissions, and the messy environmental impacts of resource extraction. To really understand just how absolutely critical this clean socket is, you have to consider this staggering statistic from the World Health Organization. They estimate that household air pollution from solid fuel cooking causes about 3.2 million deaths a year. I mean, just let that scale sink in for a second. Moving away from indoor combustion like burning wood, charcoal, or coal right inside the home and shifting towards clean electric cooking is quite literally saving millions of human lives by preventing pneumonia, lung cancer, and chronic respiratory diseases. It's a real game changer. Let's make this even more concrete. A really interesting study conducted in rural California looked at households transitioning to electric stoves, and what they found was a massive 63% drop in indoor nitrogen dioxide, or NO2, levels in those electric stove homes. Ecuador saw incredibly similar public health wins when they rolled out induction stoves nationally. At the socket, electrification means you are breathing cleaner air, period. Section 2, the toll at the source, the hidden environmental footprints of our power grids. So, while your electric stove is flawlessly clean in your kitchen, that power has to come from somewhere, right? Now, what's really interesting here is looking at the life cycle environmental impacts of different energy sources. When we compare everything from mining the fuel to operating the plant itself, coal is the absolute worst offender. In one major life cycle assessment, coal electricity was found to have 11 times the environmental impact of wind power and about 2.5 times the impact of natural gas. Burning coal pumps particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and toxic metals straight into the air, which directly drives severe respiratory and cardiovascular diseases in the surrounding communities. But hey, the good news is that transitioning away from these dirty fuels actually works. Just look at Europe. By actively phasing out their coal power plants between 2005 and 2020, premature deaths related to fine particulate matter, or PM2.5, dropped by roughly 45%. That's huge. And replacing those fossil fuels with renewables like wind and solar drastically reduces CO2 emissions and water usage. But we do have to be honest here, no energy source is completely impact-free. We are effectively trading the severe harms of combustion for entirely new challenges. We're talking about the intense mining of critical minerals like lithium and cobalt, massive land use requirements for wind and solar farms, and the super complex issue of maintaining grid stability when your power source depends on the weather. Section 3, the EMF controversy, and Arthur Firstenberg's The Invisible Rainbow. Okay, let's pivot for a second and see how this all builds. We've clearly established the physical harms of dirty power grids, but what about the electricity itself? This is where Arthur Firstenberg's book, The Invisible Rainbow, comes in, presenting a sweeping alternative history of health. His central thesis argues that the advent of electricity and electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, is directly responsible for many modern diseases. He points to these historical correlations. For instance, he notes that the 1889 global influenza pandemic perfectly coincided with the widespread introduction of electric lighting. He correlates the deployment of global radio waves with the incredibly devastating 1918 Spanish flu,
And he suggests that the mid-20th century expansion of radar and satellites aligns right alongside the rise of chronic conditions like heart disease and diabetes. His whole argument is that these technological leaps literally triggered those disease outbreaks. A really major focus of this controversy is electrohypersensitivity, or EHS. There are individuals out there who report very real, absolutely debilitating symptoms. We're talking severe headaches, chronic fatigue, heart palpitations, and insomnia. Firstenberg and other advocates attribute these symptoms directly to everyday exposure to EMFs from things we constantly use, like cell towers, Wi-Fi routers, and power lines. Now, it is incredibly important to empathize with EHS sufferers. Their distress and their symptoms are absolutely genuine. Nobody is debating that. But the key question we have to ask ourselves is, does the science actually support the claim that everyday EMFs are the hidden cause?
Section 4. The scientific consensus. What global health authorities actually say about EMFs.
To answer these claims, we have to turn to decades of rigorous, peer-reviewed research. So the crucial point here is understanding the actual physics of the radiation we are talking about. Electromagnetic fields from our devices emit what's called non-ionizing radiation. This is extremely low-energy radiation. Unlike ionizing radiation, like think about an X-ray or gamma rays, which actually pack enough energy to literally break molecular bonds and directly damage your cellular DNA, everyday EMFs simply lack the physical energy to do that. Mainstream physics and biology demystify this immediately. The radio waves coming from your Wi-Fi router literally cannot smash apart your DNA.
When we systematically contrast the claims from the invisible rainbow with the mainstream scientific consensus, a very clear picture emerges. Take the claim that radio waves caused the 1918 flu. Well, modern epidemiology and virology have definitively proven it was caused by the H1N1 influenza virus. What about EHS symptoms being caused by EMFs? As we said, while the symptoms are very real, extensive double-blind trials show that sufferers cannot reliably detect when an EMF is actually present versus when it's totally fake. The consensus points to a nocebo effect or other environmental stressors, not the EMFs themselves. And the idea that EMFs drive chronic diseases? Mainstream science consistently shows that conditions like heart disease and diabetes are driven by complex factors like aging, diet, smoking, and lifestyle, not ambient radio waves. At the end of the day, correlation simply does not equal causation.
Section 5. The real path forward. Decarbonizing the grid for a sustainable future.
So if mainstream science shows that the EMFs from the plug are safe, our real challenge isn't trying to escape electricity. It's doing the hard work to clean the massive infrastructure behind it. To balance our growing energy demands, maximize those human health benefits, and mitigate climate change, we've got a massive to-do list. First off, we must aggressively transition away from high-polluting fossil fuels, especially coal, to stop the immediate harms of air pollution. Second, we have to modernize and drastically expand our transmission grids. This means physically building the infrastructure to move clean power from where it's generated to exactly where it's needed. And third, we absolutely must scale up energy storage solutions like advanced lithium-ion batteries and green hydrogen to solve the tricky intermittency problem of renewable sources like wind and solar. So, we are left with a pretty powerful realization. Electrification is undoubtedly a miracle that has massively elevated global health and living standards. And while the fringe fears of the invisible waves around us remain scientifically unsupported, the very visible smog and the heavy carbon footprint of our power plants absolutely demand our immediate action. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question. If the plug itself is safe, how quickly can we actually unite to clean the grid behind it? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.